I lived in Vancouver for a year when I was 9 years old. One difference I noticed in speech was the ubiquitous use of "you're welcome" after you said "thank you." I'd never heard it in Scotland. I thought it sounded really nice, a good thing to say. I wonder if people in Vancouver still say that. In New Zealand these days, people say, "no worries," or "not a problem," as if there had been one in the first place. Another word difference I noticed was the use of after instead of past when telling the time. So Canadians said 10 after 12 instead of what I was used to, 10 past midday. I had an interesting lingo experience in Mackay, Queensland, when I worked there for a year, teaching unemployed 16-year-olds, when one of them told me that people in Mackay said Mackay, rhyming with hay. The other lads concurred. I was more than surprised, because most people in Mackay used the Scottish pronunciation, which I know to be the standard. I'm sure that members of the Mackay clan all over the world would prefer to keep to that. Greetings were particularly noticeable in other countries. I mentioned already in Aberdeenshire that hello took the form of simply I or I'm in, addressing a male, of course, min being man. I don't think women received more than I, unless maybe they were called hen, an expression much used by my father, who would also say dearie. I'll never forget the greeting in New Zealand when I moved there in the early 1970s and hearing for the first time "G'day." I also heard speakers who would expand this with the addition of "you all right?" So that was "G'day, you all right?" And often with more words, as if to answer the question or predict your possible reply. So I would often hear "G'day mate, you all right? Good as gold." Or the latter part would simply be goodo. For "G'day, you all right? Goodo." Other greetings I've heard are "how do?" "How'd you be?" "What's up?" Then there's the modern version. "How has your day been so far?" which I usually deal with by saying something like, "Well, it's only 10 o'clock, and I've been lucky." I came to New Zealand to a teaching post at a high school, and I learned from the kids too. They quickly told me how to pronounce book, essay, and tortoise, because my Scottish pronunciation was too funny. It took a wee while to change, but soon I was saying buck instead of book. Then the short word for a composition spelt E-S-S-A-Y, my way of saying it rhyming with Nessie, but the Kiwi pronunciation much longer, as in the verb for to try, to essay. So I'd start to say, "Take out your books of essays," rather than "books of essays." The word for small turtle was certainly not following the spelling in the Scots pronunciation of tortoise, my students' correct version being tortoise. I told them they'd be able to spell better if they used the Scottish pronunciation. I know that 2 or more pronunciations for words is common. There's a song. You say either, I say either. You say tomato, I say tomato. Then there's almond and almond, and auntie and auntie. Or again, another Scots example, water becomes water, often with the glottal stop. Water. Anyway, there's a word to describe words with 2 pronunciations, heteronym, from the Greek for different name. But it usually refers to words that change meaning too, such as in to lead, L-E-A-D, and the same spelling, lead, meaning the metal. I've mentioned already in Scottish lingo memories that getting a row was being told off. In New Zealand, this exists in have a row, but the meaning is a difference of opinion, to have a disagreement. So you'll hear, "My wife and I had a row last night." There's a common usage in New Zealand, a variant, in the same way as Scots people have many grammatical variants. Kiwis tend to use the past participle of irregular verbs in place of the past tense. For example, you'll hear and read drunk for drank, swum for swam, and begun for began. It always seems to be in these single-letter variants rather than the more differentiated verbs like blew, blown, drove, driven, and flew, flown. That said, I have heard a professional presenter on TV here say, "He has drove through there." I wonder if it's an American thing. Anyway, it's almost the norm in New Zealand. However, I recently saw a Guardian Weekly article with shrunk for shrank, so possibly not just a Kiwi thing. I won't go on about it, coming as I do from Scotland, with heaps of variants. One word I heard a lot in New Zealand when I first arrived in the 1970s was mighty, a new usage to me, as in, "I had a mighty time last night," and "it was a mighty game." Simply anything wonderful could be mighty, or in Kiwi pronunciation, mighty. I thought New Zealand was mighty, still do. Funny thing though, I never hear it now. Everything is awesome, or I should say awesome, even spelling it like a new word, O-R-S-U-M. There's an intonation oddity in New Zealand I noticed early on. Many people do a rising inflection at the ends of sentences, not just for questions. So they'll say, "I think Wellington is a very interesting small city," sounding as if casting doubt on the opinion or questioning if it's a city. I'm not sure if there's a reason for it. Maybe it's just a pleasant speech quirk. Saying goodbye in Kiwiland is interesting, with the use of the word hooroo, a form of hooray, as if it's been good, must get on now. Or short for I'm in a hurry, perhaps? Something like this is used in the south of France, where I have heard "ce n'est pas tout" to end a conversation, so the speaker can get on his way. It's used in English too in the shape of, "well, must be getting on," or "must be going," both of which feel politer than the French parting comment of "this isn't everything." I always felt this was strange for a people as polite as the French, where bonjour is de rigueur before further engagement. I have forgotten that occasionally and been politely taken to task. Finally, the name for a corner shop in New Zealand is dairy. To me, a dairy was for cows. Not sure how dairy came to be like that in Kiwiland. In Japan, it's a kombeni, or convenience store.